Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Napoleon Hill. We've all hit that proverbial wall, usually when things aren't moving as fast as you thought they would. You've put in some effort, you've been consistent, and still, it feels like you're waiting for confirmation that what you're doing is actually working. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything big, but you just want something, a shift that confirms that you should keep going. And when you don't get that affirmation, that's your mind's cue to start considering other options. You adjust your approach to how you're doing things. You question if it's just simply bad timing. And then if you linger in it long enough, you start questioning yourself. Like, maybe when you started, things felt certain. You were excited. Now, not so much. The strange thing is that in that moment, nothing has really changed. The work is still there and needs to be done. The opportunity is still there. The path you're on didn't suddenly disappear. But something inside you is now different. There's a little less drive in your effort. You begin questioning whether what you need to put into it is still worth it. Maybe you start building in the excuses so that you can protect yourself if it actually doesn't work out. And the worst part, everything doesn't usually collapse all at once. It just accumulates. But for those around you, and you know who they are, those that aren't really paying attention to you, it still looks like you're putting in the work. Now, when you consider the comment, expecting a result, I'm not talking about some kind of wishful thinking where you're hoping for the yellow brick road to the finish line. I'm talking about the disciplined, almost mechanical decision to act as if the outcome is already a certainty. Consider the way a builder looks at a blueprint. There's a plan, and he expects a house. But he doesn't stand in the dirt of an empty lot and wonder if a house might spontaneously appear. He knows that if he follows the concepts of building, first the foundation, then the framing, and so forth, the house is inevitable. It's a byproduct of the process. And because he expects it, he shows up with the tools ready to work. He understands there's going to be setbacks. He doesn't make excuses or blame the setbacks for not achieving his goal. He just figures out how to work around them. Because the end is already fixed in his mind. But most of us don't treat our goals with that kind of structural certainty. We treat them like a lottery ticket. We put in a little effort, then we peek at the results. And if we don't immediately see a winner, we let our discipline slip. We'll start questioning the blueprint. We might even start looking for easier ways to build. But what if you shifted that? What if you decided that the results you're after is simply the natural consequence of a specific set of behaviors? However, though you can adjust your thought process, there's an equally important component. No matter how committed you are, there will come a period where you've been doing the right things for weeks or months, but the landscape hasn't seemed to change. Let's call this your danger zone. It's that moment when you've stayed late, you've skipped the junk food, you've handled what feels like the difficult parts, but you look at your bank account, the scale, or that project, and it seems to look exactly the same as it did last month. This is where the skeptic in you starts saying, why bother? It isn't working. No one's going to care if I quit. That inner skeptic is trying to get you to lower your standard to match your current perspective. But positive expectancy acts like a buffer. It's the voice that says, of course it doesn't look different yet. The foundation is underground, but the house is coming. When you have that mindset, you aren't working for a result. You're working from the result. Think about the difference between someone who walks into a meeting hoping to be liked, as opposed to someone who enters a meeting expecting to prove value. The person hoping to be liked is insecure. They're looking for friendly faces. They want that approval. They're more concerned about avoiding friction or conflict. On the other hand, the person who expects to provide value, they're calm. They're observant. They don't need the affirmation of hearing, "Hey, great job," to keep their composure. They know the value is there, whether the room recognizes it in that moment or not. This isn't about being arrogant. Arrogance is actually a mask for insecurity. Positive expectancy is quite humble. It's a recognition that you don't control the timing of the environment, but you do control the quality of your input, which also has impact on your decision-making. When you don't expect to succeed, every setback feels like a validation that you're wrong. It feels like proof that you weren't meant for this. And you might think, the universe is telling me to stop. But when you're in a state of positive expectancy, a setback is just a variable. It's a puzzle piece that's not oriented the right way. You don't toss the whole puzzle and start a new one. You just flip the piece into the right direction, put it in place, and keep moving. And let's be clear. Each of us are juggling a million things. And it's easy to feel stretched thin. Sometimes the heaviest weight isn't the work itself. It's the uncertainty of the work. It's the feeling that you're running a race, but can't ever seem to reach the finish line. When you lose expectancy, you start to leak energy. You do the work, but you're resentful, or you're half-hearted in your efforts. You're physically present, but your desire has already checked out because you don't believe what you're doing is going to count for anything. However, when you decide it does count, there's a shift that happens in your brain. You stop asking, will this work? And you start asking, how do I make this work better? The first question keeps you on the fence, whereas the second question assumes the yes is already handled and focuses your attention on the how. There's another thing that gets talked about, which is the grind culture. But honestly, grinding without expectancy is just a recipe for burnout. It's going to make you miserable. It's like rowing a boat in the dark with no beacon to aim for. You're working hard, but you're easily discouraged because there's no way to validate your progress. Positive expectancy is your compass. It doesn't make the rowing any less physical, but it quantifies its purpose. And here's something else. Positive expectancy impacts how you treat other people. When you expect the best out of yourself, you tend to start expecting a higher standard from those around you as well. Now, ideally, not in a demanding, dictator, being a jerk kind of way, but in a way that raises the expectations of what's acceptable. You stop being part of the complaining. You stop going along with the excuses for why things can't get done. But this can also cause you to become a bit of an outsider because you're operating on a different frequency. You're tuned into the how do I station, while others still might be stuck on the why me station. And this brings to light a different mindset that we can all slip into. And that's selective perception. We're bombarded with millions of bits of data every second of every day. But to keep us from going crazy, our brain filters out almost all of it. It only shows you what it thinks is relevant. So if your current focus is everything is failing, everything's falling apart, and I'm a victim, your brain is going to be a world-class detective at finding evidence for that. It'll find the one rude comment in a sea of compliments. It'll find the one thing that went wrong in your day instead of keying in on all the things that went right. But if your internal mission is, I am moving towards a result, your filter changes. You start noticing the small opportunities. You see a connection between two unrelated problems that leads to a solution. You might notice the person who would be a great collaborator. These things were always there, but you were blind to them because you weren't expecting them to be useful. Now, some might say this sounds like you're being delusional, that you're ignoring reality. But this is about the long game. The reality is that almost every great achievement was preceded by a long period of no evidence or proof. Every business that succeeded likely spent years in private struggle. Every athlete who stood on a podium spent a lot of time getting up before the sun and doing solo workouts in a cold gym. Were they being delusional? Or were they the only ones who were actually seeing the truth? When you choose positive expectancy, you're choosing to be the architect of your future, rather than a historian of your past. You're deciding that your current temporary state is just that, temporary. It's a data point, not a destination. Think about how much lighter your day can feel when you operate this way. There's a relief in it. You stop carrying the weight of, what if it doesn't work? And you just accept that work is the path. So remember, it's always easy to lead yourself when things are great. It's easy to be disciplined when the rewards are rolling in. The real test is when the rewards are quiet. That silence is where your character is actually built. It's the forge. And if you go into that forge expecting to come out as steel, you will. But if you go in wondering if you're just going to melt, you probably will. The question isn't whether the results are coming. The real question is who you become while you're waiting. If you spend that middle ground doubting, making concessions, and lowering your standards, then even when the success finally arrives, you likely won't be the person capable of sustaining it. So as you move through whatever is on your plate today, pay attention to your posture, not just your physical one, but your mental one as well. Are you operating like someone who is waiting to see if they won? Or are you operating like someone who knows the win is inevitable and is simply preparing to be ready for it? As always, thanks for spending a few minutes with me. Until next time, stay sharp, stay grounded, and keep showing up.